Good morning and welcome to episode 90 of the Jaguar Report podcast. My name is Gus Logue, joined as always by my co-host John Shipley. John, how's the offseason treating you so far?
It's treating me, man. It's treating me. Get married next weekend, so trying to get as much done as I can before then. But it's been an NFL offseason, dude. Like for every team that isn't still playing, that like playoffs to free agency period is terrible.
No, yeah, it's pretty brutal. Even I feel like the end of the regular season until free agency, because it's a little bit tough because there's so much still happening NFL wise, but then you're trying to you're just kind of really balancing the fence between looking ahead to the offseason versus staying in the season doing look back at how players did and stuff like that. So it's a little bit of a weird transition period, but now the Super Bowl is over. Ryan Nielsen was introduced as the Jaguars' defensive coordinator yesterday on Thursday afternoon. So we're going to break down some of our takeaways. But before we get into the nitty gritty, I guess, just I wasn't there yesterday. So what was your in-person impressions of Nielsen?
Firm handshake. I mean, that's been number one. Have you ever seen the King to Hill episode where he and this is early 2000s. He meets George H.W. Bush, and he's a Texas guy who he loves Bush, and he has a limp handshake though. So he's I can't vote for the guy anymore. I'd vote for him. No, it deserves being said that not many coaches lose the introductory press conference. Adam Gase a couple years ago is probably one of the few, but literally every coordinator and new head coach wins their press conference. Every team that hired a head coach this offseason, any detractors, they were bought in 5 minutes into the press conference. I mean, that's how it goes. But I will say, I can see why he seems to have cultivated kind of a reputation as a guy that players playing for. He seemed very genuine, very authentic, very detailed, and also I'm trying to think of the right word for it. Just seemed like he was somebody who knew what he was doing, what he wanted to get done, et cetera, et cetera. Mike Caldwell, Mike Caldwell's a genuine guy. I really liked Mike Caldwell, the guy, but you could tell his introductory press conference how green that he was. It seemed like Nielsen was somebody who was very much, had his finger on the pulse of things. But then again, it
brings an identity, I could say.
Yeah, there you go. But like I said, though, it's hard to lose a press conference. Out of all the things I tweeted from the press conference, the one that picked the most traction was him saying, we don't know how we're going to use Trayvon, basically. We're going to see what he does well and then fit the scheme around that. And everybody's going crazy and stuff. Somebody tweeted to me a tweet of mine of Mike Caldwell saying the same thing. It was an introductory press conference, but he did say a few interesting things, which I know that we're going to get a look at. What about you? I mean, watching from the All-22
right,
angle.
The media room was nice. That was pretty cool.
The eye in the sky, man.
When I saw the video of Nielsen going around shaking people's hands, I got a flashback to Calvin Ridley doing the same thing and how he had such a great first impression. But yeah, Nielsen definitely seems like he has the goods. Even though, you were saying, there's plenty of coach speak in every introductory press conference, and there was in Nielsen's, but at least he kind of backs it up because he said this yesterday, and every defense coordinator will say this about how they put their players in the best position to succeed. But I think when you go back and look at accounts from former players and then just watch the film from his defenses, especially when he was coordinating Atlanta last year, you can see that he actually applies that and isn't just saying it because it sounds good. So I thought that was encouraging. I guess we can start with the Trayvon quote because I thought he was basically saying yeah, we'll experiment some throughout the offseason, in OTAs and in training camp, and give him a few more reps inside since he hasn't really gotten a lot of those reps at the NFL level, and we'll kind of see what he can do. But even if he shines at 5 technique throughout training camp, I would still expect him to play 90% plus of his snaps as an outside linebacker or at least an edge player in 2024. So
yeah,
we'll see, and like maybe something will change, but regardless, I think like Trayvon is going to be the edge opposite Josh Allen.
Yeah, and I think like we have a few different reasons to think that. Like if you just look back in like Nielsen's time, like as a defense coordinator, look at some of his defensive ends. Cam Jordan, Calais Campbell. He obviously likes having bigger guys on the edge. Going 4-3 doesn't necessarily mean having bigger defensive ends like it used to. Like we just saw the 4-3 Texans take Will Anderson last year, and he's like 250 pounds. The 49ers traded for Randy Gregory, so it's not a thing for every 4-3 team anymore. But I feel like it's a thing with him. Like he likes having bigger edge guys, and I think that's where Trayvon clearly goes in. So I'm with you. I think it's clear that anything Trayvon did interior wise the last 2 years, it's just too small of a sample size for anybody to have a take on.
Yeah.
And like you said, with him, it's going to be kind of getting him actually on the field and figuring out what's the best, really best way to utilize him. But I agree with you. I mean, he even mentioned, we'll talk about later what I thought the most important quote was, but he's like, we have a couple like really good edge rushers. So he's obviously talking, about Trayvon. So I'm with you. I think he probably gets moved around more, but not much.
Yeah, like there'll be some like exotic third down packages that are like look pretty cool. And I think like even though Caldwell called some interesting blitzes last year, I feel like a lot of it was like, I don't know, overloading one side and then like Trey Herndon would come from another, which like those were cool and they would work out a decent amount. But like at this point, like every NFL team is like doing that and like messing with pass protection rules in that way. But then to actually like get different mismatches, like having Trayvon line up as a one technique on like 3rd and 11 would be cool, even if it only happens like once per month.
That's the big thing. I think that in terms of how to utilize Trayvon can be improved upon. It never seemed like he was the focal point of any of the games or the blitz schemes they were trying to do. Like sometimes, yeah,
Right.
he benefited from some of the stunts and games that they played up front, but it always seemed like he was just kind of like a part of the cast as opposed to being one of the stirs that straws that start to drink. There we go. Caught myself. So yeah, no, I'm with you. I think Trayvon is probably going to benefit. Like him and Josh Allen, I think are going to benefit the most from Ryan Nielsen's hiring in general. And like you said, he definitely said a lot of like his Trayvon answer, I'd say was probably like 90% coach speak. I mean, he's got it down, man. He's got head coach level coach speak. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Yeah. No, I think so.
Yeah.
I love his very first answer was like he was like ready for Gene. He was like, first of all, good question, Gene. That was like the first words we heard from the new defensive coordinator.
That's
was
right.
Good question, Gene. And then he went into 9% coach speak.
That's right. And I think that's, worth talking about too. The first thing that he said, like, again, throughout some of the cliches that every defensive coordinator says, who's the first defensive coordinator that's ever said they don't want to attack and be aggressive? Like, it's literally what all of them say. But I do think what he said was interesting in terms of, he said they wanted to be forward leaning, forward running, going forward defense. Even when it comes to the secondary, he says when we make out of our break, we're coming out of that break to hit you, etc. Those kind of things. That's what I thought was interesting. That I don't think every defense places emphasis on that. On playing downhill, getting upfield, etc. Those type of things. And I think that kind of showed maybe more than anything what his mantra is and his philosophy is as a coach and what you can expect the defense to looking like. Because I mean, that wasn't even the case with the Jaguars defense last year. Like they weren't a defense that, especially in the back, like 7, played like that. It was more of a bend, don't break defense. It seemed like they were like letting people have the little things in an effort to, try to prevent explosives, etc. It definitely seemed like, and if you watch, the Falcons defense last year, it's kind of the polar opposite. I thought that was one of the really telling and genuine things that he said.
Yeah, I feel like that's almost another thing that's like technically coach speak, but like coming out of his mouth specifically, and then like looking at like how the Falcons defense played under him is like something that's actually true. Where every defense coordinator will say like, "Oh, we want our guys to play fast." Like I feel like that was even a famous like infamous Urban Meyer quote, was wanting all of his guys to not necessarily like be fast, but to play fast. I think he was trying to like differentiate the two in one of his first press conferences. But like with Nielsen, like that group in Atlanta last year was super fiery. And even if they weren't one of the more talented defenses, like that was one of the ways that he was able to get more out of the unit than like the talent that was there. Was just like really just encouragement and I don't know, leadership to get them to play hard.
Yeah, no, 100%. We might as well get into this next, like what he said about the pass rush in the secondary, because that's what I also thought, like the forward thing meant. So were we bulky balled or was everybody else bulky balled? I in terms of what he said about pull up the exact quote, the man coverage, zone coverage stuff. Okay, he said, okay, as one of our coaches would like to say, nothing cheap and nothing deep. When you're pressed, you take away the quick game, and we like to play shell, which when you look at us, we take away the deep throws. It may look man or manish at times, but there's press bail and some nuances in the coverage of it that's actually sometimes a zone with tighter coverage on the outside. It's actually good that you see it like it, because if we're viewed like that, then when we drop into zone, it could be advantageous for us on defense. We're going to be mixing and matching. We're going to be playing different coverages and mix and match our coverages. Well, who got owned, Gus? Somebody got owned. Did I get owned? I mean, or what was it? Dribble. Okay, I'm leaning towards more it being, again, coach speak. Like, if anything, to me, and maybe this changes the entire argument. He said, okay, regardless if you want to call it man or zone, he did say they press, and the Jaguars pressed at the second lowest rate of any team last year. Like, they rarely pressed. Exactly. Like, they played a lot of soft zone coverages under Mike Caldwell. So, okay, maybe it's not a man versus zone argument. Maybe it's an argument of they need corners who can press at the line of scrimmage, etc. How do you interpret that? Because I definitely had a few people telling me I got owned. Maybe I did get owned. I don't know. My brain's kind of a pretzel about it, to be honest. But I
don't think we got balky balled, honestly, because I think he was almost trying to be like, because there was a different part when he was talking about like his third down principles, when he was talking about how he wants to be multiple and they're going to have different coverages because opposing offenses and quarterbacks are just too good nowadays, and you can't be a Gus Bradley who just sits in your cover 3 zone. And so I think what he was trying to say is that, like, yeah, like I major in like man coverage and I want to play man coverage, but like we're going to switch it up because we have to, because we can't only play man. And so I think he was saying, like, for sure that he like more emphasized like the press part of it than the man part of it. And so that was kind of like more of my takeaway, was that, like, okay, yeah, we can't expect a lot of press coverage next year, like regardless of who ends up being the cornerbacks on the team. But yeah, so like even if they're not going to lead the league in man defense, like they're still going to be primarily a man coverage unit that just like switches it up with like the like coming off in the trail and then like switching it up into like matches and stuff like that. So he like was basically like explaining his counter moves, I feel like, but and like was just like more so focusing on his counters rather than being like, yeah, I'm a press man coverage guy.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people take that argument at face value of thinking it's like playing Madden and you're playing man coverage every single play. Like, no, you obviously like play with more coverages than that, but it's still your bread and butter. Here's my question for you. Coverages are like so sophisticated, and that's one part of, the game that I'll admittedly, like, it's hard for me a lot of times. I see a play to decipher, what the coverage is. I'm not a former backup, NFL quarterback who's now on TikTok, etc. And I'm not able to call him from the jump like that immediately. I have to, look at it a few times, figure out a few different pieces. But with coverage as diverse as it is, and so many like mix and match and stuff, can data really even tell the story on man and zone coverage like that much, you think?
I think you just have to kind of like look at it like kind of vaguely. So like I think with like a lot of like not just coverage, but a lot of like kind of like NFL advanced stats in general, I think if like a team or a player is like top 5 or bottom 5, then like it's safe to have a takeaway from that, like being like, okay, the Falcons were number 1 in ESPN coverage. So like
they were absolutely top 5.
Yeah. So like I think you can say, like, in honesty, or like it would be fair to say, like, oh, they're like a press man or they favor press man, even if like I think it'd be better to kind of like say that and just generalize it a little bit rather than being like, oh, in 2023, this defense ranked number 3 in this very specific statistic. Because as you're saying, like I
Yeah.
literally my job for a few months was to do that. It was like a football video scout for Sports Info Solutions, and part of what I charted was like the coverage of every snap. And it's even for people who have a lot more experience than I do, it's not at all an easy job. And so
NFL coverage is a wild, dude. There's so much different thing. Like it's
like
not just sitting in cover 2. You know, they're
right,
wild.
it's like as you were kind of saying, like it's not like Madden where it's like, okay, I can do cover 3, I can do cover 2, I can do cover 1. Like there's so many like even plays that have like zone on one half, man on the other half, like cover 8. Like no one in my position could like diagnose a cover 8, honestly. So yeah, there's just a lot. I think like people would get like 80, or like scouts that are qualified can get like 80% of it right, which is like enough to be like, oh, if you're top 5 in this metric, then it probably means something. But again, you can't like look at charting and be like, oh, Joe Burrow's the number 2 quarterback in PFF grade. He must be the number 2 quarterback in the league. Obviously, that like taking those leaps are a little atrocious.
Okay, so 2 more questions. One, should I just trust the shoulder pad chips to dots? And then 2, is this all just me coping?
The shoulder pad shifts the dots. I like the dots. I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. Should I just trust them that they're telling me it's man coverage? Should I just trust them?
Oh, I don't know. You
Yeah,
should ask your guy Keegan, but I do think like
that's
we
what.
talked about this before, where next gen is at least better than like ESPN's tracking. We've kind of figured that out ourselves.
That's my counterpoint to being owned. Like I'm the dots tell me I'm not owned. I'm not owned.
Yeah,
Again.
you're definitely coping a bit.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm definitely some copium. won't
Honestly,
just,
stats aren't going to be like. I mean, I don't think there'll ever be like statistics that like tell the full story, but like we're not even going to get close to that point until you can like have statistics about like intangibles or like just like feelings and like moods, like because like momentum I think is like exists, but like we just don't have like the technology to track it. So then once you're able to like track players like thoughts and confidence levels and stuff like that, then maybe we'll actually have some real stats. But at the same time, then you get into like this whole like ethical thing of like, oh, is it like really a good idea to be tracking players' moods and stuff like that? So we've got a very long way to go before like more statistics are figured out.
so you're telling me eventually I'm going to need to get to the point where I'm tracking players' moods to prove that I'm not being owned by Trent Baalke. That's more or less. Okay.
You need all the data points possible, and right now we've got nowhere close to all the data points.
I'm willing to go that far, but nonetheless,
Yeah.
to that same token, I thought the most revealing thing that he said was the second to last answer he gave, which he was asked about his core principles on third down. And obviously, again, he said some of the coach speak stuff. You know, we have to be multiple packages. We have to be diverse. We have to keep changing, et cetera, et cetera. But he said one thing that I thought was the most revealing thing that he said. And he said, the first thing we have to do is affect the quarterback, and that we can't allow the ball to come out of his hand quickly. Then the rush doesn't get there. If the coverage has holes in it or gives an easy throw, it doesn't matter who we've got coming off the edge. We've got a couple of good edge guys here. We have to get the quarterback to hold it. That to me was the most revealing thing that he said. And like, I don't think he's saying that the Jaguars specifically have to be better at that as much as he's saying that for him, like, secondary is paramount in what he's trying to accomplish. And he doesn't see like winning on third down as specifically as, you know, getting the best pass rushers possible or throwing out crazy blitz packages. He sees it as playing strong on the back end to let the front end, you know, play, and really the two sides complementing each other. That to me, like, I'm not saying it screams cornerback at number 17 because, again, I'm coping there, but I do think it shows that cornerback, like, at least to him, is pretty high in terms of importance for his defense, if not maybe the most important piece.
I mean, so at the start of his like third down principles answer, he said pass rush and coverage, and he like repeated it and said they got to go hand in hand. And so I feel like I agree with you where it was like he was more talking general than about the Jaguars and like the guys that were currently on the roster. But at the same time, he did kind of say, like, you got to win in coverage, so your pass rusher is going to get home, and we have good pass rushers, and didn't mention the secondary. I mean, like, in all, he said, like, he had some, like, coach speak about the current roster. He said, like, we've got a really talented group. I'm excited to work with these guys. And then he, like, went over, I think it was a response to your question. He went over, like, some offensive guys, but the only two defensive players he, like,
He
called out.
talked more about the offense than he did their in-house defensive guys.
Yeah, like, he only mentioned Trayvon and Josh as, like, the only two defenders. And, like, part of that was that he was asked specifically about Trayvon and Josh. So it's not like he went out of his way. But in, like, this specific quote that we're talking about, he did kind of go out of his way, even if he didn't, like, name those two by name.
Yeah, 100%. And like, I don't think he was saying this is what, like, specifically the Jags sucked at last year, but it is kind of what they sucked at last. I mean, look at games against Cincinnati, the
Yeah.
Browns, the Buccaneers game. Like, that was their, biggest thing. Like, it didn't matter that they had, arguably a guy who played as well as Myles Garrett and Michael Parsons as a pass rusher last year. It didn't really matter because quarterbacks were able to get, easy stuff. And a part of that had to do with the run defense suffering, but a part of it definitely had to do with, like, I think honestly, the philosophy just, of the secondary, just so much of that zone coverage, playing with everything in front of you. It just seemed like quarterbacks were able to get those quick, easy throws often, against them. And it seems like specifically for him, preventing those type of, gimme throws. And, maybe that's how you make sure that the Jake Brownings of the world don't beat you.
Yeah, the whole thing about the cornerback room, I mean, really defense in general is kind of more about having a good collective group and not really having, like, a weakest link as opposed to having, like, a bunch of stars and scrubs. But that's definitely goes for the cornerback room too, because when you're, like, you want to play man coverage like Nielsen does, like, you got to be able to have, like, winning matchups for 3 or 4 different, like, wideouts or at least pass catchers. You can't have, like, 2 really good guys and then just have, I don't know, Gregory Jr. starting all 17 games, because then he's just going to get, I mean, I don't mean to throw Gregory Jr. under the bus, but if they have, like, 2 really good guys, like, you need all 3 spots or even maybe 4 spots to be, like, solid, dependable guys.
Yeah, like the cornerback, like, discussion, I feel like so many fans are making it about Darius Williams and Tyson Campbell when like, it's so much more than that. Like
Kendrick Bourne went off in the Super Bowl because, like, Deebo Samuel was getting locked up by Trent McDuffie, and then Brandon Ayuk was getting locked up by Jarius Sneed. And so obviously the Chiefs were, like, okay living in a world where Kendrick Bourne was, like, kind of going off on them, but, like, I don't know. That's what happens when you've got 2 really good guys like the Chiefs do, and then like you still need a 3rd or 4th guy.
Exactly, and, like, looking at, like, their current roster setup, like, Trey Herndon is an impending free agent. Buster Brown, like, definitely had flashes last year, and I'd say, like, you can go into the year with him as, like, depth that you like. I don't think you want to necessarily go into the year with him as your 3rd best corner. And then Gregory Jr., like, he hasn't played enough to really, like, show anything in the first 2 years. Christian Braswell hasn't played. Devon Campbell is, just like a bottom of the roster type guy. Like, exactly. So, like, they have, what would you say, 2.5, like, established corners on the roster right now?
I feel like 1.5. I feel like it's just Tyson and Darius, but they both have, like, question marks because Tyson really just, like, he needs to put together a healthy season ideally, and then Darius is just
that cost them a whole person. That's fair enough. So between 1.5 and what?
Who you said 2.5?
Yeah, Tyson and Darius are 2 people, and Buster Brown is half of an established cornerback. No, all right, they have 2 1/3 established cornerbacks.
No, I think Buster is, like, good depth, but, like, I don't.
Yeah, I'm not. By established, I'm saying, like, NFL quality, like 53-man roster.
Okay, 2 1/3.
I hate you. Okay. Regardless, they definitely need, like, the discussion about the cornerback position has to, I think, go beyond just, Tyson and Darius.
Yeah.
Gus, was there anything else that Nielsen said that kind of, maybe stood out to you? I thought like the coaching staff question, like he was basically told, no, you can't like announce the coaching staff, which it makes sense. The head coach should announce, the coaching staff, but it definitely did seem, and obviously most of the reported hires, it seemed like Nielsen obviously had a big hand in that, just like Mike Caldwell did, because Mike Caldwell brought, what Cody Grimm with him. He obviously had some input as well. He seemed to at least confirm like the Jeremy Garnett hiring as defensive line coach, because he said there were some guys who worked under him. So I thought him basically saying the defensive staff is ready. We just, need the team to announce it was interesting. Was there anything else that really, caught your eye? Because it was more like a formality, type
it was
thing.
A 17-minute press conference. That was the only other thing I was going to say was like I just thought what he said about the coaching staff was interesting, because this is definitely a little bit more coach speak. But he said, I know that first and foremost, good men. Secondly, really good teachers of the game. When you put those two things together, they're just eager and excited. But like even if like most, if not all, defensive coordinators would say that like they're hiring teachers on their staff, I think it was a nice thing to hear, especially for a franchise that like I feel like fans for the past 2 decades have been kind of wondering, scratching their heads, like is the reason for all this losing because like the front office is bad and they're bringing in bad players, or is it because the coaching staffs were bad and they just like weren't teaching and coaching up these guys that were brought into the building? So it's like a little bit of a chicken and the egg thing, but it's just a nice thing to hear that, like, because I think teaching is definitely important, and I think that like what he said about teaching, and then also like having Shuey on staff, and then like the way he talked about Trayvon and Josh Allen, like definitely Trayvon and Josh need a lot of help around them on like in terms of the defensive roster, but their own ceilings for both of them are like untapped, and they led the league in sacks for like a duo last year. So even though that's like we've talked before about how sacks are a little bit fake, it's still exciting.
They're not fake when it comes to pushing narratives. They're fake when I want them to be fake. Yeah. I'll go ahead and acknowledge that. No, I'm with you. I mean, just some of the hires, like off the top, I think Chris Richard, if that ends up being one of the hires is major. I think he's one of the better defensive back coaches. Just result wise in the NFL. The last couple of years, he obviously worked with the Legion of Boom, etc. Did good work in Dallas. Did even better work in New Orleans than he did in Dallas. So obviously a good coach. Inside linebackers coach reported hire Matt House. It's one of the most annoying things. I mean, like when like a coordinator gets hired as a position coach, and like the fans are like, "Oh, you're gonna hate him," etc. Like, no, they won't. They won't even know he exists. Like, it literally doesn't matter what he did with LSU's defense, as a whole last year. But he is, well liked, people inside the NFL as like a pure like position coach. It seems like it's shaping up to be a solid staff. I know a lot of Auburn people, it seemed like, were pretty upset by losing, the defensive line coach. I'm not sure how much of that had to do with like pure coaching as opposed to recruiting, stuff like that. That's why I don't like to dabble in the college world. Speaking of, you okay?
Yeah, that was funny. I mean,
I'm happy you know exactly where I'm going.
Yeah. No, talk. Like I heard some people like Gators fans were like upset about it. Even like non-Gators fans, like Fred Taylor fans were like upset that like the young buck didn't know like the old guy's legacy and stuff like that. It's like, I don't know. He was being funny on the podcast. I don't mind it.
He's what, like 22, 23?
Yeah, like
he was watching Nick Jr. last time the Gators were good, but
people outside of the state of Florida like really know where Fred Taylor went to college. It's not like it's a super widely known fact. Like he did go on Fred Taylor's podcast.
How many people know the NFL team Fred Taylor played for?
Oh!
No, I'm just saying, like, okay, like if Fred Taylor, like if he didn't have the podcast, like would he, like, as many casual NFL fans like know him as much? He should be in the Hall of Fame, in my opinion. He's one of the best running backs ever. But like just like like you said, like there's no reason CJ Stroud shouldn't know where you went to school.
Yeah, like
I'm glad you knew where I was going with that. I was wondering if you were going to be able to make it to the pod today, or if you were going to stay in.
John, come on. My feelings can't get hurt about this topic because I don't care enough. Like,
I'm going to make you care.
You always try to jaw on me about the Gators, and it just I'm already sad about them. I can't to get lower.
Well, you got anything else on Nielsen, my friend, or are we ready to talk about the reckoning of
the bowl?
Yeah. All right. We're going to cut for a break, and we'll be right back. All right, Gus. The final NFL game of the season was played for the 27th, 26th time in a row. It did not feature the Jaguars, but it was a good game. Well, we had to tie it in somehow.
26th game in a row?
26 Super Bowl in a row.
Oh.
How many years have the Jaguars been around? I'm not good at
26 or 27.
I'm not good at math or counting. Addition.
I mean, it's been any Super Bowl that haven't been in it. I thought you meant like since the Jags lost against the Titans in Week 18, there's been 26 NFL games. I was like, has there
been? Prove to me there weren't. Prove to me there weren't.
I don't feel like doing the math or the counting.
Yeah. Well, 25-22, Chiefs win over the 49ers. We both picked the Chiefs. It was a little closer. Like I didn't think it was gonna go into overtime. I know we're gonna talk about a few things and tie it into the Jaguars, but can I fire off a few takes?
Absolutely, my friend.
Okay. I knew San Francisco was losing when Kyle Shanahan was throwing a fit when he called that timeout. Whoever was the camera guy that put the camera on him at that moment was perfect. Steve Wilkes might as well have been fired. Like right there, dude. Like Kyle looked pissed. George Kittle, no longer a fan. The epic quirky stuff that he does. Enough.
Yeah, I feel like you have to be like a wrestling fan to get it or something because I don't.
Did you see the video with him and Karlaftis?
No. Were they
you've been living in a cave? Yeah. Okay. So
probably
the sounds up of the game. That fumble on the first drive where Christian McCaffrey, where Karlaftis got it, it shows during the play Kittle blocks him like 3 yards downfield. Great block. Gets off the block and it's like, oh hey George. While the play's going on, and then Karlaftis sees the ball and gets it, and Kittle's like, yeah. So
that's so embarrassing.
Go ahead and watch that.
Yeah, the sounds of the game is great. I'm definitely gonna watch the whole thing.
Yeah, I'll send you that tweet. But for that specifically, I can no longer call myself a George. Come on, dude. You don't need to be epic in the middle of the play. He literally is like, "Oh, hi, George," or something like if McCaffrey didn't fumble, I bet he would have finished it with, "My name's George too," or something like that. So
yeah, no, he definitely had something in the holster.
Yeah, and then my final take: Brock Purdy had the most NPC game of any quarterback since Peyton Manning in the Super Bowl when he was with the Broncos.
When they lost really bad, or when they won really big?
When they beat the Panthers, and he was kind of just there.
Both of Peyton's Super Bowl appearances with the Broncos were so meh. Yeah. No, Brock, like he was like he missed some stuff. He made some nice plays, but like all of his stuff was like okay or not okay. Like it wasn't even like great one way or another. It was boring.
He was just kind of there to me, like and I've seen like. Who was it? Dan Orlovsky said he like played outstanding and stuff. And I've seen people be like, "Oh, he took Mahomes to overtime. He's answered all the doubters, etc." He was just there, in my opinion.
He's only he's getting paid like $1 million a year. Like he's going to be the quarterback for at least the next 2 years. Like for that reason alone. And he's like, I think he's like on like, I mean, Kirk is pretty good. I think he's on like the Jared Goff like level, like where he's like he can start NFL games, but he's just like not going to take you to a Super Bowl win.
Does he play in another Super Bowl in the next 5 years?
Yeah, because I think the Niners are going to make it back. Kyle is like, even if he hasn't been able to like finish the job, he's like so crazy good at what he does do. So like, I think the Niners will win a Super Bowl in the next 5 years, and I think better chance than not that Purdy's their guy. And like, I don't know, we'll get to roster construction and like takeaways and stuff in a sec, but I don't know, his salary just helps so much.
I thought you were going to stop at Kyle. It's just crazy, and I was about to like emphatically.
Yeah, but like you need to be a little bit crazy in order to be that good at what he does.
He looks absolutely dead inside.
Before the game, like
he looks terrible. He's the only coordinator like ever to like. People are talking about his team losing in the Super Bowl with him as a coordinator, right? Like that stat with like Kyle Shanahan has given up like 3 10-point leads in the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
that was the third one. Like, dang, people are reaching deep into that bag for that.
No, I feel bad for Kyle because the narratives are rough right now, but they would have been so much rougher if the Niners had won and we had to listen about how Brock Purdy was actually modern Joe Montana. Come on.
Does any of the 49ers hoopla since the game ended say anything to you? I mean, offensive linemen openly on Twitter blaming each other for Chris Jones getting, a free run. Bosa saying they weren't prepared for any of the option stuff. Like it wasn't a read option, which I feel like people keep like I've seen like a few San Francisco beat guys share that quote as like say, oh, that was one of the indictments on Wilkins, and like, well, it wasn't even a read option. It's just have you ever watched a Nick Bosa interview?
I've seen like clips. I've seen like 3 clips.
Yeah, I will take it at face value. Watch a Nick Bosa interview, and you'll see what it's the same as what he said about Trevor earlier in the year. Like, no, I'm not going to take Nick Bosa's word for it. No,
there was an athletic piece that like did highlight how like Steve Wilkes like never really had control of that side, and like players didn't really trust him. So I think like definitely there's like concern, and like it's as hard as it is to like get back to the Super Bowl after you win it, like it's way harder to get back to the Super Bowl after you lose it, because like it's so hard to like just like keep the band together, even if you're like in a spot like the Niners, who have been like right there for like the past 4 years really. Like it's really tough to like keep telling yourself to kind of like stay on the tracks. But I honestly think they're like a good defensive coordinator hire away from like being in the same spot they were, because like with Shanahan running the control board, like John Lynch seems like a pretty legit GM by this point. Like I feel like I used to think it was just all Shanahan, but they done too good of a job of bringing in talent for it to be only Shanahan. And so, I mean, like they're in a spot where they can like hand out crazy contracts, like Javon Hargraves last year, and then like trade for Chase Young. And so, again, because of Purdy's contracts, like I think their window will be open for maybe not 5 years, but 3 years. So if they get someone good in the building to like just take care of the defense, almost the same way as the Jaguars, where like they just need like an adult to like take care of that side of the ball, then like I think they'll be right there back winning it.
Yeah, I think one of the big things working against Wilkes, at least as an outside observer, is like anybody who goes there, like you're running the system Shanahan wants to run, you know, on defense as opposed to running your own. I don't know who they like. I mean, they're the only team in the NFL with a defensive coordinator opening, you know, right now. That's the big thing working against them is every other viable candidate for the most part has been hired.
Yeah,
so, I mean, it's obviously not going to be Mike Vrabel. Brandon Staley seems like the only big name who would make sense. Like, because it wouldn't be Vrabel, it wouldn't be Belichick. So the only other big name, Rex Ryan. Huh?
Ooh. I was happy to see that Zimmer got hired by the Cowboys, because I think Zimmer was like a better hire than Rex, but I would still love to see Rex back in the league. I think that would actually be
the Cowboys interviewing Zimmer, Rex, and Ron Rivera in the same cycle in 2024. Such a good bit, dude. That's like Like, if you had told me those were candidates in like 2014, I would have like thought that.
They're
great.
so like weirdly unserious. They're like so good but so not good at the same time. It's so funny. I can't wait for it to all just like fall apart next year since Dak and McCarthy are like on the final years of their contracts. It'd be pretty funny if it all got blown up. I mean, they're too good. They're too good for that to happen, I think, even if like there's a little bit of an adjustment period with Zimmer. But and like I'm a Dak guy, so I don't like I think they'll make the playoffs and lose in the second round, but it'd be funny if it got blown up.
That's fair. That's fair. All right. In terms of the Super Bowl, what did you learn, Gus, as it pertains to lessons the Jaguars can take away from?
The first one is man up on defense. I feel like a couple years ago, I really came around on this idea where like when you get to the playoffs, like you just have to be able to play man coverage because like zone will kind of like only get you so far, especially as kind of Nielsen said in his presser, like with how good offenses and quarterbacks are nowadays. Like almost every offense either has a play caller or a quarterback who can like dice up zone coverages and kind of take what the defense gives them in zone. And a lot of teams have both where they have like a play caller and a quarterback who know what they're doing. And so like at a certain point, you got to kind of like just line up and like have best on best and kind of have your guys win. And I think it's similar to like offense in like the ability to run the ball late in games when everyone knows what's coming. Like there's just a certain point in games, but especially in important ones and like in January where like when you know what's coming, like you got to be able to execute rather than like just leaning on like screen passes instead of the run or leaning on like soft zone shells instead of press man to like get you as far as the playoffs. And so again, like that point kind of like first occurred to me a few years ago, but then it was really like hammered home during the playoffs because I think it was probably just that I heard Tony Romo say it a couple of times. He definitely said it at least once during the Super Bowl. And I think he said it also during the Chiefs-Bills game that just like at a certain point, like you got to just like line up your guys and like make it be man coverage, like because then there's like no really other way to like beat elite quarterbacks. Even there was a quote from Steve Spagnuolo after the Super Bowl saying that like they were running a lot of zone and they went away from it during the game because Brock Purdy was dicing them up, which like I don't know if I really noticed that, but
don't remember that period. But
I don't think that's like just Coach Speak. I think Steve was being honest there, and like then they ended up playing more man, and like McDuffie had an absolutely ridiculous game against Deebo Samuel, and so I think like Mike Caldwell's defense, even though I think he did an impressive job against like elite quarterbacks with the players that he did have, it's just like the Tampa 2, like even like Bulls when the Bucks won the Super Bowl against the Chiefs, like they had a lot of zone, but there was so much inverted coverage and so much changing up the looks. And so like if you're not doing man, you gotta like do that and like be changing the picture post snap like pretty much every single play. But at the end of the day, it's hard to run man coverage because it's hard to get like 3 or 4 capable coverage players like on the same team. But
not every team has Snead and McDuffie.
Yeah, but like that's just at the end of the day, that's like the ideal version of playoff defense is to play press man. And so I think it's to relate it back to the Jaguars. I think it's a pretty good sign where like even if there's going to be a lot of debate this summer of like what like we'll see whether Darius stays, we'll see whether a cornerback is selected in the first round, we'll see whether Marshawn Lattimore is in Teal. Like regardless of like what happens in like this offseason in the cornerback room, I think Nielsen is for sure on the right path of like what he wants to do of taking away cheap, taking away the deep, and just making life a little bit harder for quarterbacks.
Nothing cheap, nothing deep is the new thing in Jacksonville.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah. Few thoughts. One, love Spags, but he's kind of going on my shit list. All this pro Purdy stuff he keeps coming out with since the Super Bowl. We don't need to give them any ammo. I need him to stop being a nice guy. I need him to cut a promo or something and say how easy of a game plan it was. Nonetheless.
Yeah, no, that's a fair want. I respect that.
Nonetheless, I agree with you. Like just how the Chiefs like limited Deebo Samuel, like for example, like not every team has the horses to do that. Like McDuffie obviously played out of his freaking mind.
Yeah.
On like several of plays. Like I think obviously McDuffie gets a lot of it's getting a lot of praise for his deflection on third down when he blitzed. But I thought the best play a defender made in the Super Bowl, who wasn't like Chris Jones, was when he deflected a deep pass to Debo in the end zone.
Yeah.
It was just a fantastic play, fantastic coverage. So I agree with you. I think if you're like looking through like that lens, Caldwell probably was never going to be that guy. Like it just same way Bowles, like he's never just going to want to go across the board and man up and just play extensively. So I'd agree with you. It definitely seemed like Nielsen is at least has the right idea, and for how playoff defenses need to play, because I mean the Chiefs defense, what they did in the Super Bowl, what they did really the entire playoff run against like some great offenses, Miami, Buffalo, Baltimore, San Francisco, like that's literally murderer's row to go against, and they were outstanding. So I think that's a good take.
Spags coaches butt off this year, especially in the playoffs. But like you just said, that's a murderer's row. That's like one of the most impressive runs by like any coordinator, but especially on defense, like ever. I feel like you're the Spags.
Yeah, no, 100%. Spags it'd be awesome to see him become a head coach again. It was. I had to do a double take when like the Rams president for like the last like year or two, when he was there, went on Twitter the other day, was like, yeah, he needs a head coaching job. He didn't get a good chance the first time around.
I saw that headline. I was like, why is the Rams guy saying this?
Somebody replied to her and was like, I'm looking forward to your investigation on the people who it was a good take. All right. My biggest takeaway, Debbie Downer, whatever, the entire time I watched that game, I couldn't help but think the Jags aren't anywhere close, to those two teams. Like, not in the sense of I think they can challenge the Chiefs and 49ers next year. I just – did you feel at any point in that game that the Jaguars are an offseason away from being as good as either one of those teams? I mean, we've seen – the results. The Jags lost by 8 points to the Chiefs this year. They got steamrolled by the 49ers. If you're even going past that, against some of the teams that have made the conference championships in the last couple of years, they lost to the Ravens this year. They lost to the Eagles and the Lions, last year, plus the Chiefs, obviously twice. Like who's like the best team, the Jags have really beat, in the last 2 years to show you that they can be as good as the Chiefs. Texans, Bills, and
Bills. The Bills were like, that was kind of like the start of like a really weird skid for them, though. Like it was their first, I think it was Buffalo's first game without like Daquan Jones and Milano, or maybe like one or two of them got hurt during the Jags game. And then like being like the Texans win was like a good win, and it was in Houston, but at the same time, like it was like first year head coach, first year quarterback, first year play caller, I think, and Bobby Slowick. The first year defensive end, Will Anderson. Like you kind of, even though the Texans were really good and will continue to be good, like that's still a game you probably should have won. And so I agree with you. Where like even though I looked it up and the Jags are 17-11 in the regular season under Peterson until week 13 against the Bengals, or week 14 against the Bengals, whenever it was, when Kirk and Lawrence both got hurt. But like if you separate like 17-11 by like playoff teams and non-playoff teams, I'm sure it's pretty stark in that they could perform a lot better against non-playoff teams, which like obviously that goes for every team. But I'm agree with your point where it's like even if they got a division title last year and they were like right on the doorstep this year, like there's still a huge gap between getting into the playoffs and like playing in the last game of the playoffs.
Yeah, and that's my thing. Like being AFC South champion isn't the same thing as being as good as the Kansas City Chiefs or as good as the 49ers have been the last couple of years. And that's my big thing. I feel like now entering year 3 of the Peterson bulky, era, I'm still thinking I don't know how they get close to these two teams. Obviously Lawrence taking a big step would be significant, but I already think Lawrence is pretty good. So like that's already factored into my thinking. It's just my thing watching that game was just that the Jags have so many decisions to make, so many holes to fill that I was just scratching my head of, okay. And I think that they'll be a playoff team next year. I think they'll do enough. I think the hiring of Nielsen will be big. Lawrence will be healthy. I think they'll be in the playoffs next year. But the ultimate goal, obviously, for every team is a Super Bowl. And, I mean, they're unfortunately in the AFC where you have to get past Mahomes to have a chance to play in the Super Bowl to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
I just no part of me during that game was thinking, the Jaguars could be close to this soon. And I don't know if I felt that way last year watching Chiefs and Eagles. I maybe it was a bit unfair because the Jags are obviously coming off a thrilling playoff win and then a close playoff loss to the Chiefs. But that was my big takeaway during the Super Bowl is I think the Jags will be in the playoffs next year, but I think they still got a ways to go to be duking it out with Mahomes.
Yeah, and like it's easy to point to drafting because like any team that makes it to the Super Bowl has had some really good recent drafts, and I think the Jaguars roster needs to improve in terms of like both their star power and like the guys that are kind of like the Monteric Browns, like get more of those guys who can like just like fill in for injured guys and kind of like fill out your roster. But even if the like on paper the Jaguars had as talented as a roster as some of those as like the Chiefs or the Niners, like the experience level is completely different because now like Mahomes has played in like 100 playoff games, it feels like at this point. And even if like Purdy is still pretty young, like he has more playoff experience than Lawrence. Like I think it really hurt the Jaguars to not make the playoffs this year because even if they didn't win a Super Bowl, like it really matters to like get to the playoffs and try to like figure out and like learn how to win in those types of environments. And so I think Doug knows how to win in those environments because obviously he won a Super Bowl. And I think Nielsen kind of like knows how to win just based on like, I think he knows ball. But like Trevor Lawrence, like he's, I think in a class of a lot of non-Mahomes quarterbacks where like even someone like Josh Allen showed all throughout last season, Josh Allen, the Bills quarterback, that like he's arguably like he's right there with Lamar for like the best quarterback not named Mahomes. But he doesn't quite know how to like win consistently yet, or like he doesn't know how to like take what the defense is giving him and like live to see the next play and like not take the shot even when he wants to. And so like that's just like a really hard lesson for quarterbacks to learn. And I like Lawrence has played in 2 playoff games, and I know he was a big winner in high school and he was a big winner in college, but like I'm sure the rosters around him looked a lot different than they do right now in Jacksonville. And so I think like it's easy to say that the Jaguars don't have as talented of a roster, but I think the even bigger thing is that they just don't really have like the playoff experience on the roster either.
Do the Jaguars make a Super Bowl in the next 10 years? Putting you on the spot.
I was going to say, yeah, I think they'll make at least one, but like being in the same conference as Patrick Mahomes is tough, man. Like I was
only other dude
Justice's pod, and they were saying like Mahomes is going to turn so many quarterbacks into Dan Marino for this generation. Like, I think they'll make a Super Bowl.
My big thing is Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert combined. 3 great quarterbacks, multiple MVP caliber seasons between the
Joe
3
Burrow, CJ Stroud, they just keep coming.
Yeah. 0 Super Bowl appearances between those 3. You can throw CJ Stroud in there. Okay, throw Burrow in there. There's 1 between the 5, and even that one.
Burrow's just kind of fluky because like he's definitely an elite quarterback, but like during that Bengals Super Bowl run, like
he wasn't good.
They were that was all Big Lou. That was another defense coordinator playoff push. Not as much.
Burrow quietly kind of stunk in the playoffs, man. Yeah. I'm also never going to forget the Chiefs for losing to that team because Bengals fans won't shut the hell up about that game. Like, still, I saw something. It was, I think, the day after the Super Bowl. It was Bengals fans like still somehow like making the Chiefs, etc. about them, and somebody puts that meme of a guy pointing in the mirror, but he put a Bengals helmet on. He's like, I'm going to make this about myself. that to me is what Bengals fans are in the year 2020.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm forever regretful that the Chiefs let them have that. Gus, you got anything else from the Super Bowl that you thought was? I thought the fact that they basically used the Jaguars play for the second year in a row to win the
Oh
Super
yeah,
Bowl.
that's a good show.
That's a good bit.
Yeah,
That's a good bit.
that's
It's good.
that's so Jags.
Yeah, it's a great bit. Honestly.
The Jags kind of sort of back-to-back Super Bowl champs, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. There
If
you
you
go.
want to get in your head that much. I don't think I really have. The only other thing I wrote down was like balanced roster because like everyone was tweeting about how like Mahomes has won 2 Super Bowls since they traded Tyreek Hill, and it's like, well, yeah, you kind of like had to do that. You had like too much in like one area, and you got to like spread the wealth a little bit. Like part of the reason the Niners were able to have such an awesome skill position group is because they have Brock Purdy on $1 million salary, and like they also like have a below average, arguably bottom 10 offensive line. Like it's really just Trent Williams and then like
4 dudes.
Yeah, some jabronis. So I think I don't know. That was just interesting how like especially for the Chiefs, really, like how even like they had Mahomes, Kelsey in his prime and Tyreek in his prime, and they're like, this isn't really sustainable. We need to maybe they shouldn't have like made the receiver room quite as bad as they did, but like clearly they like went all in on like building their defense in like the past 2 seasons, and clearly it worked out for them.
Do they win back-to-back Super Bowls if they keep Tyreek? Because if they keep Tyreek, they probably can't afford Chris Jones these last 2 years.
Yeah, probably not. Chris Jones has been.
Chris Jones, like there could have been like 4 different Chiefs. It could have been MVP the other night, like him, McDuffie, Mahomes, obviously. Like Chris Jones went crazy.
I think he's like as important to the Chiefs dynasty as Travis Kelce, but obviously isn't talked about as much.
I hope he stays at the Chiefs, man. I don't want him to become a free agent and
just like sign with a random team for a lot of money and then have like
sign with like Arizona and get 4 sacks over the next 2 years before getting released. I just
don't do anyone. I think you should stay there.
Yeah, I'm with you. And that was probably the other thing is like this goes back to my previous point, but I don't think the Jags are close. Like just how many blue chip players both teams have.
there was like 8 Hall of Famers in that game. It was crazy.
Yeah, and the Jags blue chip players are like Josh Allen and Trevor Lawrence has a hue of blue. Like I think he's a blue chip.
2 of them.
Yeah, so I think he's a blue chip player, but obviously that one like would get some pushback. And then, but you look at the Chiefs and they have Creed Humphrey, Patrick Mahomes, obviously Travis Kelce, obviously Chris Jones, Snead, Trent McDuffie. Like they have some dudes, and then the 49ers are like unbelievably stacked.
Right.
But it all goes back to drafting too, because most of the guys, if not all the ones we just named, are guys they drafted and developed, and that same thing with the 49ers. Other than McCaffrey, all their best players are dudes they've drafted and developed.
Warner, Kittle. Trent Williams is another that they brought in, but it stands.
The Jags are developing too many green guys, not enough blue ones.
Green's a compliment.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They have some green players. They got plenty of greens. They got no blues.
I was gonna say, I feel like I was trying to think of like who would be the next blue chip. That's a good question. Like who's
Anton, dude?
I was gonna say that. I was gonna say Anton is like trending in the direction of being a blue chip player.
I think
maybe Tyson would be one.
All right, now
green.
I know it was injury related, but got to get past last year. I think Anton would be the next one, and the next closest one would be Trayvon. I don't. He's not one, but he'd be the next. Like
I think ETN might be right there too, honestly, which is partly about like the state of the position. Like I feel like ETN is like objectively a top 10 running back, but it's more about just like who else are you gonna put on like number 8, 9, 10 on your list of top 10 guys?
Is Trayvon one of their 5 best players? And in my opinion, either if you answer yes or no, it's probably a bad thing. like if he is one of the 5 best players, and that's what we're talking about. Like the roster needs to be significantly better than that. But if he's not, then took him number 1 overall. Why isn't he one of your 5 best players?
Who do you think's a better NFL player? Like today on February 16th, Christian Kirk or Trayvon Walker?
Christian Kirk.
Okay. Yeah.
You?
I think so too. It's just that like Kirk is like I don't know, like limited in some stuff. So like I think like
Trayvon probably you
could
could make an
become
argument Trayvon could be more valuable.
Yeah, and Trayvon could be like more of a all around player and does like everything well, where like Kirk does plenty of stuff well, but like I'm mostly because of his size, he's never going to be like a complete guy, which is okay, but
which is fine. Yeah. All right, you got anything else for us, my friend?
So last year I picked the Ravens to win the Super Bowl.
Yep.
Even though they didn't, they were a Final Four team, right?
That's nice. Yeah.
They were a Final Four team, and they led the league in wins, point differential, and DVOA during the regular season. And Lamar was MVP. So I'm just doing a little fake victory lap, even though
the bet wasn't will the Ravens lead in DVOA. That was, so I want you right now to predict your winner for next year's Super Bowl.
Green Bay Packers.
Okay. Write it down, please. Write it down because I'm not going to remember
it's
that.
written. It's written. Okay. I honestly just it's got to be. I ignored the AFC because I'm like, I don't like the Chiefs. I'm pretty sure no team has ever won a three-peat in NFL history.
And I don't think they have, and I think they're going to do it, dude.
I think they have a good chance to, especially like with like Jones and Snead possibly maybe coming back. Like, I mean, Andy Reid and Travis Kelce both said they were coming back. No one's going to hire Steve Spagnuolo as a head coach this year. So they've definitely got like all the pieces, and their defense is like so young that like it's not like McDuffie and like George Karlaftis and those guys are going away. So I think they definitely have a good chance. But like I kind of just scratched off the AFC when I was thinking about this because I was like, the odds are kind of stacked against the Chiefs, but I also like feel uncomfortable taking any other team from the AFC because of the Chiefs, because like that's kind of went wrong with me for the Ravens this past year. And then I was looking at the NFC, and like the NFC West is like I just kind of like I think they're going to like almost cancel each other out because I think the Cardinals are going to be like like maybe be a wild card team next year and actually be like sneaky competitive. I like Seahawks because I like McDonald a lot and I like Geno. Obviously, the Niners are elite. And then the Rams, I think, are going to make some noise next year when they have like a more complete roster kind of around Stafford for McVay. And then like I'm not going to pick anyone from the NFC South. Let's see. NFC East, the Cowboys and the Eagles are both talented but not trustable or trustworthy. Yeah. So that leaves me with the NFC North, and the Lions are unserious until they get a new quarterback in my eyes.
See, I can't say that one.
It was really just a process of elimination, and I think like the Packers are still very young, and I know I just talked about how like playoff experience and like learning how to win is so important, but like I think Love is legit, and I think LaFleur is more than legit, and they don't have Mike Patine or whatever who was their defensive coordinator.
It was Joe Barry.
Joe Barry. They don't have a Joe Barry.
Mike Patine was the one before. They're all.
They don't have either of them anymore. So
Vic
like
Fangio's bastard children.
Yeah. So I think they've got good coaching, good quarterback, young talent who like could take a step next year, winnable division, not in the same conference as Patrick Mahomes. So
see,
you heard it here first. Now the Packers are going to be first in wins, DVOA, point differential. Jordan Love's going to win MVP, and they're going to lose in the conference championship. So you can book that.
See, I'm not a Jared Goff guy at all, but I think I'd pick Chiefs Lions because I'm with you. I think Goff is mostly mid, but I don't think you need a great quarterback to get to the Super Bowl. I think you probably need one to win it more often than not, especially against Mahomes. But Brock Purdy made it. He's mid. Jimmy G made it. I don't even think Jalen Hurts is honestly that good. Like if you're getting down to brass tacks and taking out some of the gimmicky stuff. So I don't hate it as a take though. Okay, okay. So we've officially moved on from the Ravens. And
that was me closing the chapter on the Ravens and opening a chapter on the Packers.
Okay, I'm looking forward to poking fun of that for the next 12 months or so.
They have I saw their cap space is like middle of the pack, maybe even below average, but they've got 5 draft picks in the top 100. They've got a first, 2 seconds, and 2 thirds. And I feel like their drafts have been crazy recently. So
Yeah, they have been. They have been. That's fair. I don't hate the take. I begrudgingly am a Jordan Love fan. I was kind of hoping
yeah,
he'd be. I was hoping he'd be awful just for my pal Justice
yeah,
Mosqueda.
same.
Yeah,
One
but
of my good friends, shout out Graham, is Packers fan.
but he unfortunately is a fun player. So
yeah, unfortunately, he rules.
yeah, that's my stance on Jordan.
Yeah.
All right, Gus. Anything else for us?
Packers over Texans. That'll be my official Super Bowl prediction since you just gave two teams.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to take the Texans, but then it was just like, since AFC is so crowded, I was like, nah, I'll go to NFC. And then I think the Jaguars should sign Mike Williams from the Chargers because I think he's like a near lock to get cut because I think he tore his ACL last year and he's had a couple injuries. They have 4 like albatross contracts between Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Khalil Mack, and Joey Bosa. And there's like absolutely no way they can keep all 4 of those guys. They might even have to like part ways with 2 of them. But I think Mike Williams is like the guy that's most likely on his way out. And then it fits like the big body that the Jaguars are missing in their receiver room. It fits the injury discount that Balky likes, even though that narrative has died a little bit in recent years. Like
you had him at torn ACL.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I think like Higgins, has never been like he was never going to go on the market.
He's not going to be a free agent.
I think Mike Evans is like a feasible pipe dream, and like because they're gonna have to probably tag Anton Winfield at safety. So maybe if you give Mike Evans a really nice check, then he'll come to town. But other than Mike Evans, like and T Higgins, and then Calvin Ridley, I don't know. It's just a bunch of meh options out there. I feel like.
I think there's a good chance Calvin Ridley will be the best free agent receiver once the dust settles. But definitely worth looking at. All right, this time, Gus, got anything else? Got all?
No, I'm done. There we go. Empty the tank.
All right, good job. Hey, good takesmanship. That was a good little run for you. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Hey.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, there you go. You're getting better. I'm proud of you. All right. That was episode 90. Who would have thought? Thank you guys for joining me and my friend, co-host Gus Logue. We'll be back. I'll just be upfront. We'll maybe be back next week. Getting married next Saturday if we find the time. But if not, we'll be back sometime when I get back from the honeymoon to talk about franchise tags, free agency, all that good stuff, broken player relationships, everything that everybody loves talking about. So, thank you guys for joining us, and we will be back whenever we want. So, thank you.
You just got balky-balled.
Yeah, you just got balky-balled, loyal listeners. Thank you guys for joining us. That's right.